The problem with watching videos like this, and I've always had problems with like vaccine conversation, is that when I released that video about like Rand Paul going after Dr. Fauci, if you look at this shot right here, you can see the stuff we had to put over the video. This is a paper of some study of some sort, and the U.S. government gain-of-function deliberative process and research funding. And if you look at how many sources we use in this video, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and we have to edit it over there. We number it in the corner, all done by Geek. Geek did all of this. I can't take any credit for it. All I did was react, and that's how many sources we needed. And half of it was me talking. So it's like 6 minutes, maybe, of Rand Paul and Fauci going back and forth. And I didn't even really say much of anything, and we needed 6 sources. So when I watch something like this, 13 minutes and 20 seconds of 2 people, Dr. Fauci was a medical expert. Neither of these people are medical experts, going at it about these other potential better vaccines than the one we're using. I would need like 12 to 13 to 14, and this is why this is most likely not going on YouTube. Unless it did go on YouTube, and now I'm going to look really stupid, and Geek is going to have to edit a clown nose on my face. Is because the amount of sources that are going to be needed to tear this apart or like give it the proper attention it needs, in case, even if it's correct. It's like, what's that old thing about like spreading disinformation? It's a lot easier to throw shit at the wall than it is to clean it off. All it takes, boom, 1. That's all you need to do. Boom, you just spread disinformation. Somebody's going to have to come over there, actually take the feces off the wall, get some soap and water, scrub it off, put some air freshener there, all this stuff to remove the effects of that spreading of feces, right? That's one thing. So a good example of this would be, let's say I say 9/11 was an inside job. And I say something like, jet fuel can't melt steel beams, right? Well-known conspiracy theory, we've all heard it before. It took me, 4 to 5 to 6 seconds to say jet fuel can't melt steel beams? How much effort will it take to tear that apart? Well, first I gotta be like, okay, jet fuel's effects on steel beams. Effects on steel beams. Then I gotta go look through all this 5 times, gotta read all this. How did jet fuel melt the steel beams in the Twin Towers? Go to Discovery UK, gotta watch this, and then I gotta source it with actual articles because this video doesn't work, and oh boy, look at that, I liked it, and all the work that goes into it. It's gonna take hours and hours and hours of work. Comparative to the 4 to 5 seconds it took for me to say the nonsense.
I'll take it over from here. Hello, everybody. My name is Homozygoat. I'm a PhD student at the University of Vermont. I have a pretty extensive background in microbiology, virology, and immunology. Today, what we're going to be doing is fact-checking Jimmy Dore's latest appearance on the Joe Rogan Experience with respect to a lot of the claims about COVID-19, the vaccines that they have made.
Jimmy Dore, Joe Rogan. Was Jimmy Dore on a Joe Rogan podcast recently? Oh, he was. He was.
The Joe Rogan
How did this go?
Experience.
So what about, can we talk about ivermectin?
Yeah, sure.
So I covered it, what they did in Mexico City, and ivermectin seems to be a drug that not only treats it, but it will prevent you from getting it.
I think we need studies. We need legitimate studies, and I don't know how that happens, because the problem with this argument, this conversation is, you know, you'll have people saying, I've used this on my patients, like Dr. Pierre Corey, who's been on this podcast, and I 100% believe him, and I support him, and I'm not saying that he's not telling the truth. The problem is, I think in order to state something emphatically, like this is what we need to do, this is the best treatment, we need studies.
Ivermectin has no evidence behind it as far as any utility to either prevent or cure COVID-19. When we talk about ivermectin, we can literally go to the FDA's website, that they have basically a very brief explainer as to why taking ivermectin for COVID is probably not a good idea. One, because it's not approved. There is no randomized controlled trial that has actually done this. There's no randomized controlled trial that has been properly designed to actually even assess this in the first place. Right, but again, a lot of people are going out and buying ivermectin that is meant to treat animals. I actually have a veterinarian friend of mine who is literally complaining that a lot of his colleagues can't find ivermectin anymore to treat their cows and stuff because people are just buying it up for themselves for COVID. So in that sense, ivermectin can potentially be neurotoxic to people who take it. There are many possibilities for ivermectin to interact with medication. Of course, this is a disclaimer. This is not medical advice, but according to the FDA, ivermectin is definitely not something that is approved to treat COVID-19. A lot of the evidence that people like him cite to claim ivermectin is used to treat COVID comes from a collection of many very poorly run and designed randomized controlled trials from low to middle income countries where the controls are entirely wrong. A lot of the treatment arms actually include other medication besides ivermectin. And one of the biggest randomized controlled trials to date on ivermectin was actually withdrawn from consideration for peer review after 7 to 8 months of being in limbo because it was found out the authors just made a bunch of stuff up. They literally made up patient data. They copied and pasted patient data from elsewhere. They were plagiarizing large parts of their paper. And it took a medical student as an assignment for school to figure this out, right? Nobody really paid attention to all of this until people started bringing ivermectin into the conversation. So all that to say, again, there's no available evidence to suggest ivermectin is a COVID-19 prophylactic or cure. And the evidence that people online tend to point to is entirely made up or poorly done in terms of the scientific randomized controlled trial design that goes into it.
Right? This is the only way you find out. And, well, who's going to fund these studies?
Who's going to fund a study?
And the problem is it's a generic drug.
That's it. No one wants it.
It's a drug that's been around for 40 years, has a long history of use. And also, there's a difference between using it as a prophylactic, so using it as a preventative measure, which is one of the things that Dr. Pierre Corey talked about.
I love these two medical experts. They're wonderful, by the way. I love these two medical experts just extending my brain cells with this knowledge.
About on this podcast, I forget where they used this, but it was there was hundreds of doctors, and then there was a percentage of them that used ivermectin as a prophylactic, and there's a percentage that did not. The percentage that did not, half of the doctors roughly, or half of the healthcare workers got COVID. The percentage that did use it as a prophylactic, 100% did not get it. Now, I don't know if they got lucky. This is why you need a large study, and it's a long-term study. Maybe, I don't know, what was their job different than the people who got it. I don't know. That's the problem.
Yeah.
So when I'm a fucking comedian and a cage fighting commentator. When I'm talking about very important issues, I have to hedge my opinions on these things.
I know.
It's tricky.
But in an environment where people aren't allowed to talk or question things, well, for instance, my doctor. So when I got the vaccine, I got the double. And
which one did you get?
I got the Moderna because I have an underlying health problem. I've talked about it before on the show.
We have talked about it, yeah.
And so my doctor, because people are like, why did you trust the government? No, I don't trust the government. You trust Big Pharma? No, I don't trust Big Pharma. I trusted my doctor.
Yes, trusting the doctor who has been giving his patients what Big Pharma has cranked out for many, many years. Physicians do use what Big Pharma creates in a research laboratory sometimes to help people. Like, how is that shocking? I'm not a defender of Big Pharma by any stretch, but we're talking about something that was actually created by scientists that work for the government that then was mass produced by pharmaceutical companies. So bringing Big Pharma into the discussion, if we're not talking about Pfizer, that is, it's kind of a red herring. It's not really related to the vaccines at all. I think the only relevance pharmaceutical companies have when we're talking about the vaccines is about patent rights, intellectual property, and then this big question mark of whether or not we're going to need a third booster, because Pfizer's been talking all about that lately. So Jimmy Dore, I think, is just opening a rabbit hole, kind of like the one he just opened about ivermectin at the very start, to sort of hand wave away a lot of his scientific literacy and blame Big Pharma.
Right.
My doctor who saved my life and said that because of your thing, you should get it because we don't know how it's going to affect you and you blah, 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 blah. So I got it. And then, I just, the symptoms you get from it, they never went away for me.
What were your symptoms?
So I had body aches, flu-like fever. I had joint pain. I had a stiff neck.
How long did it last? How long did your symptoms last?
So on April 17th, I got the second jab, and I just never got better.
Was it immediate? Before after the first jab, did you have side effects?
Yes, but they went away. And then the second jab.
How long did they last?
When I got the vaccine, my arm hurt because of the needle for like a day. Then I was fine. That was my experience with the vaccine. I wish I could talk about like all this other stuff and like spiel like a long thing. I can't. All it was like ow, and then I was done.
After the first shot.
I don't
just to counter this with what I'm talking about right now is the majority of cases. What I went through is what the majority of people who get the vaccine go through.
remember, but because
a couple days.
Yeah, it was like maybe a week. I think a week. And then the second time, they just never went away. And I was like, what is going on? Because I would get these waves of exhaustion a couple times a day. And then my producer had the same stiff. At the fifth week, I had a stiff neck. He got a stiff neck, and my wife got a stiff neck. And we all got the stiff neck on the side where we got the shot. So I got it on this side. They got it on that side. And then I looked it up, and it turns out stiff neck is a thing that people experience from the jab. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that. They don't tell you that.
You know, the incidence of systemic side effects was less than 1% following the first dose and less than 2% following the second dose, with the exception of fatigue and headaches, and 3.8% and 2% of people had that respectively. So those numbers are pretty low, right? We're talking 97, 98, 99% of people having not really that much issue with messenger RNA vaccines. If we want to talk about side effects, you know, there are certain age groups, you know, it's younger males who tend to be predisposed to myocarditis, pericarditis as a side effect, but those numbers are still very small. We're only talking, you know, 400-ish cases at most, and that's a side effect that the overwhelming majority of people recover from, and they're fine afterwards, right? When we talk about side effects too, everybody talks about the Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca vaccines, which are a separate technology. They're viral vector vaccines in comparison to messenger RNA vaccines. Again, the side effect percentages there are pretty low as well. The big problem with those was the blood clotting, the vaccine-induced thrombocytopenia. When it comes to side effects for those vaccines, the incidence was also pretty low. I think we're talking, you know, maybe 100 to 200 people all across the entire planet. So all that to say, even when these rare side effects happen, and you know, the blood clotting was one of these things that kind of caught scientists off guard, because the incidence that it happens at was not captured in the clinical trial. There were too few people in the clinical trial to actually figure out this is a side effect that could happen in the first place. It's that rare. So when these things do happen, science and medicine do react very quickly. They, as we all kind of know, they put a pause on Johnson & Johnson to investigate the issue. But at least in the United Kingdom, they started offering younger folks messenger RNA vaccines instead of a viral vector vaccine in the AstraZeneca shot because of that blood clotting side effect. So yes, there are rare side effects. The odds of any one person having these rare side effects are incredibly low. And when they do happen, when they do pop up, scientists and physicians, they do react very quickly.
And so that's common. I'm like, okay. And then it spread to
Oh, Geek, by the way, you're going to have a lot of fun editing that me covering the Insurrection Committee. Because, my God, that's going to need a lot of editing, my friend. Oh, my God. Because that is like 3 hours of content that needs to be edited down to like 30 to maybe 30 minutes to 40. It's going to be a blast.
the whole neck. Okay. Now, my producer and my wife, it went away. Their stiff necks went away. Mine didn't. So anyway, I tweeted about it. I tweeted like, hey, this is just to let everybody know, this is what's happened. This is my reaction to the vaccine.
Yeah.
And because when people started to come on me, like call me anti-vax, and
Right.
I'm like, no, I got the vax.
Right.
I got it. I go, when people have a reaction to an experimental vaccine that is not FDA approved, you're supposed to.
Okay, I don't like this line. It is not FDA approved, correct, but it was approved for emergency use. They don't just let random stuff go out there for emergency use. They didn't just pick up the vaccine, shake it a little, look at it, says that looks medical or something, then like give it to everybody. They still had to go through testing and programs for that.
In addition to what Dylan said here, Dylan's right. No, they didn't just pluck a vaccine out of thin air and decide to just shove it in everybody's arms like some sort of weird, gross science experiment. That's not that's not what they're about. When it comes to emergency use authorization versus fully FDA approved, functionally speaking, when it comes to a vaccine, there's no difference. And people don't really understand this. When something is given an emergency use authorization, it's given that because we have an emergency, right? We're in a pandemic, people are getting sick and dying, and we want to roll out a very powerful tool to combat the virus in the vaccine. So with that being said, the whole difference in designation simply means production of the literal vials that contain the vaccine can start at the same time as the clinical trials, and other bureaucratic bits and pieces that go in a clinical trial are able to be sort of accelerated and circumvented that don't have any effect on the actual safety testing of the vaccine, right? The group of people who are holding out for a vaccine right now, waiting for it to be fully FDA approved, are doing so inappropriately because the threshold of safety data for a vaccine in a clinical trial is the same for an emergency use authorization as it is for full FDA approval. So there have been no corners cut as far as safety is concerned. The threshold of proof that scientists have to meet when putting a vaccine into a clinical trial like this has been met. And we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier in the video, but again, the rates of side effects are pretty overwhelmingly low in messenger RNA vaccine recipients across the board. So not only did the clinical trial show that the vaccine was pretty safe and effective, and not only were there no corners cut, but we've also administered the vaccines to millions and millions of people by now. And most of them are doing just fine. I'll speak myself. I got Pfizer. I didn't grow a third arm. Nothing rare or freaky has happened to me. Now, of course, that's not a guarantee, but the numbers overwhelmingly prove that these vaccines are safe and effective. And Jimmy Dore, when he talks about this, he uses the phrase experimental vaccine. Dylan was absolutely right to call him out on that, because Jimmy's trying to use it to fearmonger, to scare people into thinking that the government cut corners, that there still needs to be more safety testing done, that we're going to need to repeat the same safety testing in increments of years and years and years from now until people finally feel safe. A lot of the vaccine hesitant folks who are worried about safety, they're basically trying to move the goalposts and make excuses as to why they don't actually want to get vaccinated, because the safety data is there in spades and it all looks great for the vaccines.
For example, a great example would be the state of Maryland. It's my state. It's where I know the most numbers for because it affects my community the most. In the state of Maryland, last month, 120 people died from COVID. Tragedy. Tragic. Horrible. 120 lives stopped too short. 120 people who would not be at the dinner table. Terrible. Every single one was unvaccinated. Not a single one had their 2 vaccines. Point blank, period.
To not suppress the reactions. You're supposed to ask people what the reactions are so we can make the vaccines better.
That's a thing that when Jen Psaki's talking about misinformation online and combating misinformation, she distributed misinformation.
Of course.
Because she said that it's approved by the FDA and their gold standard.
She said that?
She said that.
And misleads the public by falsely alleging that mRNA vaccines are untested and thus risky, even though many of them are approved and have gone through the gold standard of the FDA approval process.
Yeah, so, with respect to the approval process, again, messenger RNA vaccines have been given an emergency use authorization. The safety data to get one of those is identical for it to be fully FDA approved. So there is no difference between the two. What Jen Psaki said in the sense that the vaccines have undergone the quote unquote gold standard review by the FDA, that's true. That is objectively true because the clinical trials happened and we have approved vaccines because of it. So anybody who claims that the vaccines haven't undergone sufficient safety testing for approval are not up to date with reality.
Joe, when you go get the jab, they give you a piece of paper, and on it in bold black letters, it says, "This is not an FDA-approved vaccine."
This is more fear mongering from Jimmy. You know, he's claiming that, you know, he was given some ominous piece of paper by his pharmacist or doctor, whomever, and, you know, told that, oh my God, you realize it isn't fully approved. You know, you better be sure you really want it. When, you know, if we're just operating in anecdotes here, that didn't happen to me. My pharmacist said, yeah, here's the consent form. Read it. And there were no big, scary, bold black letters saying as much, right? And at this point, Jimmy is now just going full right-winger and trying to discourage people from getting the vaccine while sort of doing this like weird Mott and Bailey where, you know, he's hiding behind the position that he's got a vaccine, but he's sort of advancing past the position of, well, it hurt me, and as we'll get to later, you know, the spike protein thing made my brain swell, or whatever he has to say, and therefore, you know, maybe it was a mistake for me, therefore you shouldn't, when in reality, one, we don't know even how true that is, two, he's probably lying based on how the science works. And three, we're on Joe Rogan, and just about any scientific piece of information without an actual genuine professional acting in good faith, we can pretty much throw a lot of what gets said here into the garbage because it's intellectually nonsense.
Right.
And they go, you see that? And I'm like, yeah. They go, you okay with that? Yeah, I guess. My doctor said I'm supposed to be here.
And then the thing is, well, let's be clear. This is from the 26th, right? This is from 2 days ago. Let me read this. What is your understanding as to why we have not seen full approval yet from the FDA? And do you have any kind of expectation from when we might? Miss Pask, from Jen.
Well, the FDA is the gold standard in our view, and they move at the speed of science. They look at a range of data, and they make sure that when they make conclusions and when they give full approval, they have confidence in the science and the data that backs that up. It wouldn't be responsible to expedite that process at a faster speed than
the science and data allows. Okay, so she does acknowledge that it isn't FDA approved.
But the point is,
yeah, the Johnson & Johnson uses the old technology, and the Moderna and Pfizer, they use the ones that was developed by DARPA.
yeah, but the point is, it's like, it's not FDA approved. It's,
No, because that
you
takes
can't-
a while.
So if she's saying that, right, this is...
Isn't that misinformation?
It is.
Seems like it.
And it's, if it says it when you get the jab and it says it in bold print, and so your experience, even though you this is your personal experience and you did get vaccinated, people are so rabid online about
Oh, my
this.
God.
It is the most divisive subject, I think, ever since Trump. It really is. It is a nutty, divisive subject. And people just get furious about it. And they're furious if anybody talks about any negative side effects, even if it's accurate.
I know. So I had tweeted about it just because I wanted to see if other people had this experience.
Right.
And, you know, maybe it's just me. Maybe it's not. So I got contacted by lots of people.
Okay, can somebody clarify something? I'm trying to figure out about this Jen statement. Is the statement that I read out loud earlier her talking about it being approved? Because that didn't sound like her talking about it being approved. That talked about her talking about how it wasn't approved and how they view the FDA approval as the gold standard. Somebody look into that. Thank you. Okay, yes. Okay, dope. Just want to like double check here just to make sure we got the story straight.
Same experience, and I got contacted by a doctor who's leading a bunch of other doctors, a group of doctors, and studying this, and they just submitted a paper on people about the vaccine, right? And so he tells me over a DM, this is what we think is happening. This is a spike protein. You're suffering from a spike protein thing, and blah, blah, blah. And go to see your doctor, and hopefully your doctor will work.
Hey, you know what? If there's any medical terminology I'm familiar with, it's the spike protein thing. Spike proteins, you got to be careful with those because due to the spikes, they might stab you, and that hurts.
With us, and give me ivermectin and fluvoxamine I'm taking for inflammation in my brain.
They function like porcupines.
You have inflammation in your brain?
Well, that's because it causes inflammation. So the spike proteins cause inflammation. And so they did some kind of blood test on me, and they said, "Yeah, you got the thing."
Was it a D-dimer test? Is that what it was?
Joe, you got me. But
Okay.
they said, "You look, you have the same. You're right where a long haul COVID person is. Like whatever the markers were, I had the same thing. You're right there." And so I go to my doctor and I start to explain to my doctor about what this other doctor told me, and my doctor says, "Oh, I'm treating 5 people just like you, and one of them is a neurosurgeon and one of them is a nurse." And they were afraid to talk about their symptoms because they were afraid to be ostracized and stigmatized. And I'm like, what a messed up
Strange.
situation we're in this culture.
Okay, so can I actually, this is something I've thought about for a while, right? Okay, so I know people who have, and hell, this might happen to me in the future, right? Who have come out as gay, who have come out as like gay people, right? Homosexuals. And later they're like, I thought I was gay, turns out I'm bisexual. And they do that. And then what'll happen is that anti-gay individuals on the internet will use that as a tool against queer people. They'll say, see, you can be cured. Hallelujah. And because of that, they don't talk about their experiences as openly of discovering their sexuality. I know a lot of people who have gone through like experience of discovering themselves. At one point thought they was gay, and then later was like, oh, I'm actually just bisexual. And that people like showed me a fake dichotomy of you're either gay or bi or whatever, right? That happens. And so maybe it's like in a similar vein that like doctors don't want to talk about like side effects because they don't want to discourage people from getting the vaccine because they know every single thing they say, even if in context makes complete medical sense and you should still get the vaccination, can be used and weaponized by anti-vax people to encourage less and less people to get the vaccine when vaccine disinformation has reached to all new levels. Also, can I just say something completely honest? I saw there was a lot of heat on Jen Psaki and the Biden administration for the statement of the government working with social media companies to stop the spread of disinformation. If we're dealing with a medical emergency that's killed over 600,000 people, right? And we got a death cult, which that's what they are, a death cult of anti-vaxxers spreading disinformation about how vaccines like give autism and vaccines do this and vaccines do that. I am not opposed to the idea of medical professionals that work with the United States government advising social media companies on what type of social media posts to look out for to remove. I don't think it was ever expanded upon exactly what they meant by that, but it wasn't like the removal of just conservative commentators for saying stuff like, vaccines should not be mandated by law.
Right.
When they politicize medicine, where doctors and medical professionals are afraid to talk about their symptoms. That's horrible.
It's also putting people in a position where big pharma is the good guy now.
Yeah.
Which has never happened before.
Never.
And especially the exact same companies that people were openly criticizing in the past and pointing out lawsuits that they've lost for hiding information about test results, about things that have happened during studies. And these same people are now ignoring any possible side effects.
It's nuts. So, I mean, how do we make it better? How do we know maybe some people, that suppression of data is not the way you improve a vaccine. The suppression of people's symptoms and data, that is not, and in anything, it's not how it works. No. But that's how they want it to work because of Trump. Because if you say, it's just crazy.
It is crazy.
Even that hydrochloroquine, right?
Again, Jimmy Dore's brought up hydroxychloroquine after talking about ivermectin in the very start of this clip. Again, like it's the same pattern, right? Some crackpot in Didier Raoult, again, probably mispronouncing his last name, but the French physician who came out of nowhere and claimed that he had a magical treatment protocol for COVID that was 100% success rate with hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin. Nobody could replicate that. Clinical trials were done over and over and over again, wasted a lot of time, resources, and money on all of that to find out that it actually made things worse and not better. And therefore, the premature emergency use authorization that was given out by Trump's FDA was promptly revoked. So I think in a sense, people might actually be a little bit skeptical of the EUA because of what happened with hydroxychloroquine, right? People might think that, they threw HCQ at the wall to hope that it stuck. In reality, it just made a hole in the wall. So people I think might be skeptical of vaccine EUAs because of that scenario. So again, Jimmy is not in a position to even be remotely close to where that French physician was at the start of the pandemic, because he has no credentials. He's not part of an academic institution, and he's not doing anything but DMing with some mysterious, unknown, unnamed doctors to fearmonger around the vaccine. So it's incredibly insane at this point in the pandemic that he's just repeating the conspiracy theorist's greatest hits. Like, he can't even come up with anything better than hydroxychloroquine. Like, we've been there, done that, dude. Like, can you... At least if you're going to do something like that, just go back to talking about ivermectin. Like, that's what's in vogue right now, man. Like, there's nothing else coming down the pipeline that Brett Weinstein's aware of. So, ivermectin's really all you got. If you're going to be a conspiracy theorist, at least try and be good at it, Jimmy.
Somebody bring me. Okay, Wasted, can you send me the full, quote on that? There are other mRNA vaccines like the one for the Zika virus. Those have been approved by the FDA, i.e. Jen Psaki is 100% right, and OFC, Joe Rogan is full of it. Okay, 1 second. Let me see if I can find this in here. Oh God, this is such a big... You gotta have to tell me where this is in this giant document of everything that was said during that day. You gotta give me a little bit more specifics. A modified mRNA vaccine developed in collaboration with the Moderna Therapeutics containing E and PRMM proteins and undergoing concurrent phase 1 and 2 clinical trials. Search mRNA. Okay, well, let's do it that way then. So that is more than just competition about vaccines. The risk and impact there is, this type of information magnifies, the risk of potential side effects associated with Western vaccines. This is what some of this misinformation is doing, and misleads the public by falsely alleging that mRNA vaccines are untested and thus risky, even though many of them are approved and have gone through the gold standard of FDA approval processes. So it's just talking about mRNA vaccines generally, like the one for the Zika virus, which have been approved by the FDA. Okay, so this just 100% seems like people interpreting Jen Psaki's words completely incorrectly then. Like usual. But to be completely honest, this seems a little disingenuous. If you were able to take this and stretch it into she's saying that the COVID vaccines are FDA approved, which I feel like basically anybody with 2 brain cells who talks about who has heard the conversation online about vaccines knows that they're not FDA approved and knows they're approved for emergency use.
Remember,
Hydroxychloroquine.
Hydroxychloroquine that Trump was touting, and they were like, he's nuts because he's touting it. I didn't know anything about it. But then all of a sudden studies came out that say, hey, no, that actually has been helping. So now we have contradicting studies, right? It was in Newsweek. I wasn't making it. I didn't pull it out of some crazy thing. It's establishment mainstream news thing. I'm pretty sure it was Newsweek. And I tweeted it out and I said, hey, can we stop? Now, can we stop politicizing medical science? Can we get back to just doing medical science again and asking questions?
How much damage did Trump do on the one conversation he had? Do something like cleaning, something would you
so much
use,
damage.
You do
put bleach right in the it's so
light.
Much damage.
You could kill it with light. It's going to be a miracle. Like that one thing where people are like, what the fuck is? Because he was riffing.
Yes,
he was clearly riffing.
Clearly riffing.
He didn't prepare for this. He probably just got done eating a fucking double cheeseburger, and he's like, because.
He's a salesman. He's just a big...
But because he's so divisive, everyone is still... It's almost like... Do you know, if you got in a fight with someone, like maybe your neighbor, and then you got in your car and there was a road incident, and you're like, get the fuck out of here! You're already so ramped up.
Yeah.
Because of the fight you got in with your neighbor.
Yeah.
This is what the whole country's like.
That's a great analogy.
That's what it's like. It's like the whole country just got in a fight with the neighbor. Like he's putting his trash can on your lawn. Like, hey, you fuck. Keep him on your own side, you piece of shit. And then you're in your car. Fuck! And this is like the whole country is like at 8 out the door. Out the door in their car, already at 8, on a scale 1 to 10. They're already ready to go. And so whether it's the vaccine or whether it's the border wall or whether it's kids in cages or what the fuck, whatever it is, everybody's so goddamn angry and ready to go. And then you deal with the economic crisis that a giant percentage of the country just went through over the past year, and then losing loved ones to this fucking disease and all this chaos and and so many people who I've never experienced like high levels of adversity, and all of a sudden they're confronted with it. If you've played it safe your whole life, you've really never done anything risky, never taken any chances, you've had a regular life with a regular job, you play it safe, and then all of a sudden now you're fucked and you're confronted with a perhaps deadly disease that might take you out, and you got all these other problems in the world, and everybody's like, and they don't have the coping skills. They don't have the ability to handle these things. And
Joe Rogan isn't really wrong here. Nothing he said here is wrong. He's pretty on point about this.
That's where we find ourselves as a country right now. And it's weird because then you have that with the echo chamber aspect of social media, where everybody's just looking for positive reinforcement of their own ideas and confirmation bias. It's wild. Catch new episodes.
Anyway, Jimmy Dore and Joe Rogan are the two medical experts I get all medical information from, and I would never take any piece of medicine not confirmed and endorsed by Jimmy Dore. So we're going to raid Gappy, a good friend of mine. Thank you all for stopping by for today's stream. Tomorrow, we'll be reacting to Channel 5's new video. We'll also possibly be talking to Lonerbox about the long history of trash television in this country. And this Friday, we'll be having a Hippie Dippy Roundtable with people like Denims, Chud Logic, Actual Jake, Aircraft Sparky, and more. See you guys later. Love you all. Send Gappy my love. By the way, I see my editors telling me this is not the right channel. Bullshit. Bullshit, it is the right channel. I'm seeing it right now. It's got 51 views and it's live. I know what I'm doing. You fools. You nerds. I know what I'm doing.